Hi, Vanessa. This is Professor Evans with feedback on your Essay 2, the rhetorical analysis. So as always, we'll start with what we were looking for in this assignment specifically. And here we were looking for an effective introduction that would kind of engage an audience, a clear thesis, saying kind of helping to steer the audience and where we're going, an effective argument, kind of clear structure to how you're doing it, specific examples to support assertions you're making, and then a fairly narrow scope as well. So you're not trying to do too much, but kind of a couple of rhetorical elements in a lot of detail. And then also not getting trapped in the author's argument, but rather focusing on the rhetoric of the situation. Couple of things. The first thing, I am seeing lots of those things in here, and I think it's one of the things that you're talking about in your cover letter is also true, is this idea of found it difficult to make sure that I was focused on the specific element which the quotes included as well. So it's that idea of kind of pulling these things apart. There's often the really tricky part. I mentioned that kind of analogy of it's like, well, how do you describe a magic trick? How do you describe a magic trick? So there were a couple of places where I was totally thinking, I was like, okay, she's pointing to it. She's saying, oh, no, that's sleight of hand, but you're not saying, well, how did it work? And I think that's what we're looking for as well. The other thing I would start thinking about is this idea of your introduction. There are a couple of things here. So an introduction should always put a reader into a context, but should also kind of engage the reader to want to continue reading as well. So I'm getting a very contextual introduction. So one of the things that the prompt asks for is to say, okay, give me a summary of what's going on as well. So I think that's all what you're doing here is give me the author's name, the title of the essay. Remember also that the titles of essays should just be in quotation marks, not italicized as well. Just the titles of books, movies, something like that would be italicized. So that then you kind of give me this, doesn't believe torture is be used at all, but how are there specific circumstances he deems acceptable. So you are doing a good job in kind of encapsulating this. My suggestion would be to maybe think about some kind of introduction that has to do with rhetoric. You seem to be dealing with this idea of pathos and logos. So one of the things you could talk about in terms of a generalized introduction, because remember, introduction is always going to go from a general idea to a specific idea, usually terminating in your thesis as well. Maybe something about the fact that, they're kind of polar opposites on the scale, thought and heart as well. And so that sometimes a combination of those can work effectively to persuade an audience. So that might be your initial idea. And then your example of this is Sam Harris's article right there. The other thing that I would think about is this idea that I said that talking about the effectiveness. Is it effective? At the end of the day, does he present a credible argument? Or are there holes in this argument as well? Or in the types of rhetorical techniques that he uses? So that may be the one thing that you want to clarify with your thesis as well. You talk about this section here. I think that sometimes people feel like they don't want to use the word pathos, and so that they'll use just kind of emotion as well. And I think sometimes it is almost better to use the actual terminology itself, because that helps the reader kind of talk, okay, we're talking about this specific element of the rhetoric triangle as well. So you talk about here, we say numerous scenarios involving hostages and bombings and a 7-year-old girl. Okay, so you point to this. You end up saying right here, Harris uses descriptive scenarios such as this to engage the reader's sense of distress and pain. So one of the things is that, I would want you to also unpack that it's a young child, that it's this asphyxiation, which is, somehow or another, it's not like they're going to shoot them. It's even worse than that. Somehow or another they're going to be, suffocated. So I would kind of tease out those ideas when you're talking about it here as well. And then similarly here with the Gandhi one as well. So when you end up saying, Gandhi's remedy for the Holocaust believed the Jews should commit mass suicide because this would arouse the world and the people of Germany to Hitler's violence as well. You have a slight problem here, I think, as well, because you've got a quote within a quote. So this second set of quotes should actually be single quotes and then terminate with a double quote here. Okay, so appeal to the ideas against the act of torture, but still manage to show how the slightest act of violence could save the lives of hundreds. I don't know if... I definitely think that there's pathos involved in this, because he's totally talking about, the extermination of millions of Jewish people in Nazi Germany. But I think this is one of those examples. I would go back and re-look at this example, because I think there's logos and pathos kind of played into it here. But I think you need to explain how that would work a little bit better as well. He's kind of talking about saying like, oh, well, if we all did what Gandhi would do, then millions of Jews would have killed themselves. And that's terrible. And that can't be right. And so he ends up ending the sentence talking about how it would be almost like the thugs would inherit their earth. So I think that this one, he's definitely playing with emotion, but you need to kind of tease out that, the idea of, the Holocaust in Nazi Germany and how that would work as well. This one, I think this works a little bit better as well. That in terms of using this logos, we're tortured for the far less individuals are injured in the process. I think this works a little bit better as well. So I think it's primarily your pathos section. The other thing you could do is that you could combine these. So if the Gandhi one does kind of talk about, use logos as well. So maybe there's a third section. There's a pure pathos section. There's a pure logos section. And then maybe you tease out another one where, oh, these things can be combined to be effective as well. All right, I hope this was helpful.